the depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God are unsearchable and unfathomable. Yet he has given man dominion and power of conquest of its environment. Take, for instance, the wealth of nations sits on nature's resources from oil and gas, coal, solar, wind, water, and so on and so forth. Now, Nigeria, for instance, is one of the largest reservoirs of oil and gas in the world, and 80% of its revenue earnings depend on it. But the twist is that fossil fuel is destined just as much as the world itself. It's been compromised by global energy sources which rely heavily on fossil fuels. Now, many of industrialized activities powered by fossil fuels, and Nigeria relies heavily on fuel for her energy consumption and, of course, electric power generation. For decades, the sector has been bedeviled with surmountable challenges from generation, distribution, and transmission to depth of power and transmission infrastructure. Now, despite efforts to reposition the sector via privatization some years back, power generation is still far below the installed 13,000 megawatts capacity, oscillating between 4.5 and 5,000 megawatts for a consumption demand of over 17,000 megawatts. Now, like the rest of the world, Nigeria is looking for a way around her energy and power generation labyrinth. The country is also seeking to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. As they say, what you're searching for in your Sokoto, or rather, what you're searching for in Sokoto is in your Shokoto trouser. Martha Media said, and I quote, "Every 24 hours, enough sunlight touches the earth to provide energy for the entire planet for 24 years. She says, each hour the sun provides 430 quintillion joules of energy, whereas the earth consumes only 410 quintillion joules of energy in 1 year. And as Hillary Clinton quotes, the benefits are enormous and multi-phased. Clearly, we need more incentives to quickly increase the use of wind and solar power. They will cut costs, increase energy dependence and our national security, and of course, reduce the consequences of global warming. But the question is solar power as cheap as it comes? What kind of investment will the Nigerian leadership make to address the energy and power challenges that common people face? On Late Edition this week, we have technocrats, professionals with varied experiences to talk to us in this regard. I am Claire Adilabu Abdul-Razak. Thank you for joining me. Engineer Babagana Mohammed holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Maiduguri. He started his career at the Chad Basin Development Authority as technical officer and rose to the position of assistant chief mechanical engineer at the 30 megawatt new Mati power station. Now, he moved to NNPC and NATCO in 2002 as senior engineer and has since participated in many design projects in the oil and gas sector and held many positions of increasing responsibilities, now from design engineer to project lead engineer. Engineer Babagana Mohammed was a founding member of the Nigeria Society of Engineers Victoria Island branch, that's in Lagos, and was elected chairman of the branch in 2012. Now, he became chairman of the Lagos State NSE Chairman's Forum from 2013 to 2014. He also served as vice president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers for 3 consecutive years. That's between 2014 and 2016. He's currently a member of the Presidential Power Initiative Committee, member of the governing board of the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI, as well as member of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, that's COREN. Engineer Asikpo is an engineer and technology expert. She has extensive global corporate experience in the oil and gas technology as well as health informatics industry. She is a tough leader, a data-driven optimist, an innovator, as well as a strong advocate of due process, inclusion, transparency, and excellence. Engineer Asikpo's career started at Shell, where she worked as an oil and gas engineer at the company facilities in Warri, Port Harcourt, and Lagos. Now, she contributed to streamlining processes using technology to drive efficiency and cost leadership in operations. Extended her professional excellence to the US, where she works at the intersection of technology and healthcare delivery. She leverages her expertise in artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, electronics, medical records management, and of course, so many areas to improve outcomes in the solid organ transplantation population. Engineer Asikpo holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree in electronics, we call it elect, engineering from the Federal University of Technology, Owerri, a postgraduate diploma in oil and gas technology from Robert Gordon University, Aberdeen in the UK. She acquired a master's degree in exponential technologies from the Singularity University in California, USA, and has a master's in health informatics from Capella University, Minnesota in the United States. She has multiple industry standard certifications as well as other degrees in multiple industry standard certifications in vendor-specific products and project management. Mrs. Olu Verheyen is the founder and managing director of Latima Energy, a consultancy that provides specialized commercial services for capital projects and investments in the energy sector. She has over 20 years of business development, commercial negotiations, investment, public policy, and general management experience with international companies. She's a member of the Advisory Council of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Advisory Board of Energy for Growth in Washington, D.C. She's held various commercial, finance, and governance roles at Shell. She negotiated transactions valued over billions of dollars and advised on government policies to attract investment to the gas sector and enhance liquidity in the power sector. She was also a partner and investment committee chair at Persistent, a climate-focused investment firm. Now, she oversees a Pan-African portfolio of distributed renewables companies and, of course, led the firm's investment in West Africa's leading provider of low-carbon energy solutions for commercial and industrial customers. Ms. Olu Verheyen has a BA from Long Island University and a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to late edition this week, and my sincere apologies for keeping you ladies and for starting up late. We must hold Engineer Babagana Mohammed responsible. Thank you very much for joining us on late edition.
Thank you, Ma.
Ladies, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you.
So we'll just quickly start off with, let's quickly look at issue with, generating power. And I want to begin with the fact that the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, did say, and I would just like to steal from his words, do we dare reform our national economy such that, now I'm transposing my own words, darkness vanishes and 24-hour electric supply flourishes in our country? Do we dare reform our national economy such that we have 24 hours electricity and gas supply? Let me start with Engineer Babagana Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, before we go too far, let's look at where are we coming from. What are the structures on ground? What actually happened? Where have we started?
But is it possible? Can we dare do that?
Of course, it's very doable. It's very doable.
Yes,
That's a fact.
Let's begin on that premise.
It is absolutely possible, and it is doable. First, we have qualified skills and manpower that can drive this activity. We have them. They are on ground.
Okay.
That is the starting point.
Okay.
First is manpower.
Okay.
And then government deliberate attention. When I say government, what do I mean here? You see, when people say power, people start to just look at power as a single entity. No. Power is an entity, but it has three ports. Transmission, distribution, and generating. If you think power is about generation only, you are wrong. If you think power is only about transmission, you are wrong. And if you think only power is only about distribution, you are still wrong. The three components has to be on ground and at equal phase before we arrive at what we are saying. Let me also say, look at when past President Obasanjo came on board, the narrative he was given was generation, generation, generation. He doubled into, and he thought that was the end and everything will be over. But that wasn't the end. You see so many generation companies have come up. We have a very high generation capacity. But how do we evacuate them? They did not factor that. Until when these things were done, then they started seeing this generated power cannot be evacuated because it has another leg. That's called transmission. The transmission infrastructures are dead and down. Even if you have 20 million megawatt generated, how do you evacuate them? Do you have the facilities? That's where the issue is. But that does not happen. And now government, when Buhari came in, when this government of APC Buhari came in, he has invested a lot on infrastructure. Now in the PPI, which I was a board member of recent, the narratives are that we want to raise apart from the transmission capacity, how do we evacuate what the generating capacity that we had? How do we evacuate them?
Even before we go into all those, I would have loved for you to tell us, because you are very optimistic that this is doable. This is something governments have not been able to do, even since the beginning of our democratic journey in 1999. It has been a problem, despite the privatization, even under Obasanjo's regime, we came, under former President Goodluck Jonathan's regime, yet we are unable to hit even, get near half of our targeted megawatts in terms of generation and distribution. So I want to look at, if we are able to do it, what are the things on ground? What gives you that assurance that we have the capacity to ensure that Nigerians enjoy 24-hour supply of electricity? You have said we're able to do it. Let me put you on hold and bring in Mrs. Verheyen, who, of course, is an expert in oil and gas. Mrs. Verheyen, do we dare reform our national economy such that Nigerians are able to enjoy 24-hour electric supply?
Yes, we can dare to do that. And and you have asked certain pertinent questions. Why hasn't it been done before? I think let's first take a step back so we frame it properly for your audience. Energy drives economies and sustains societies, yes? You mentioned Asiwaju Tinubu. He said, we are the church rats, and energy sort of, I'm paraphrasing him, energy is sort of the Holy Communion. So we know it's essential to everything. And when we talk about energy, we're talking about more than just electricity, which is just a subset of energy consumption. When we talk about oil, we need it for driving machinery, fuel, aircraft. You need it to make countless chemicals that are used in detergents and plastics, fertilizer. So it is because we have framed, part of our challenge is because we framed our energy consumption just around a subset of energy, just around electricity, right? And the fact that our energy consumption is incredibly low. You mentioned our gas and oil and gas resources. We have some of the largest reserves in the world, but we haven't been able to commercialize those because low energy consumption is a consequence of poverty, but it also intensifies poverty. So it's a chicken and egg challenge. If you don't have enough customers who can pay for it, then how do you make sure that you're able to attract the investments that you need, not only for generation of power, transmission of power, and distribution of power, but other uses that I've mentioned around oil and natural gas. So that's been a major challenge. And when we say we can dare to sort of fix that now, I think what we've been gradually doing is the stepped approach. And what needs to happen is a little bit of an acceleration. And I think that's exactly what is articulated in the Asiwaju Shettima plan, for example. So for power, the focus is on removing the commercial and regulatory bottlenecks in transmission and distribution. So you can evacuate the existing generation capacity. We overinvested in generation capacity, but we did not make sufficient investments or make enough arrangements to make sure that we could attract private capital to the transmission end and to the distribution end. The idea of keeping prices incredibly low because we can't afford it, or that because a lot of Nigerians can't afford it, was the wrong approach. We've decided over this last 8 years, we've slowly moved towards cost-reflective electricity tariffs. What that allows, what that will enable going forward is a few things. You can pay market prices for gas supply, so there will be much more assured gas supply because the people who are investing in gas supply know that they have a customer that can pay what they need to earn a return and make the investments. You will have prices that enable distribution companies to invest in metering so that you limit the amount of losses on the distribution end. You will allow investors on the transmission end to earn a commercial return so that we can attract capital to expand transmission capacity. All of this is required. You need that. So it is basically making sure that you have a robust commercial and regulatory framework in place so that you can unlock the existing capacity, then diversify your renewable resources. You were talking about solar and wind capacity earlier. All of those things will still need, because you can't use solar to generate power throughout the day. You need gas to help you support the intermittency of solar and hydro and renewable. But it's the key aspect that is focused on going forward is how do you make sure that the commercial and regulatory framework is such that you can attract private investment at very accelerated rates so that you can make the investments that are required. And the key thing there is around the points I've mentioned, around a commercially reflective tariff, an enabling environment.
Let me just pause you for a while and allow Engineer Asikpo to also give us her opening perspectives to the issue. Engineer Asikpo, we have oil, we have gas, we have hydro, we have solar, we have wind, we have all the resources that we really need to be self-sufficient in power generation and of course electricity, because Mrs. Verheyen had talked about the fact that we concentrate power to one subsector, but that is what is affecting the majority of Nigerians now. That is the source of the livelihood of majority of Nigerians. In fact, that is the root cause of poverty, if I may say that much. So what are your perspectives? What do you think that is responsible for our inability to supply 24-hour electricity to the homes of many Nigerians?
Thank you for having me on your program, and thank you to the co-panelists that have, thrown so much light to the issues that we are discussing here. I do agree that power is a core requirement for us as a country and individuals in our country to be able to progress. But power and electricity and generation and consumption is not in isolation. As a country, we have multiple infrastructural issues which impedes our development and utilization of different sectors of our economy. And power generation is one of those sectors that is being affected. And over time, we have had government interventions in this area, and sorry, and individuals also have tried their ways to generate power for themselves. We have generators, we have solar systems that people are using, and all these infrastructural interventions have been very expensive for the government and for the individuals, and it is not meeting our needs. Now, there is an approach with the cement project that is ongoing right now under the Presidential Power Initiative that is looking at a long-term solution, an end-to-end power solution that is not just about generation alone, but includes transmission and evacuation to the end users. Now, we have multiple points of views from the different presidential candidates on how they are going to address this issue. And we are having these issues not only in terms of just giving us electricity, but we are having an intersection where in the global community now, we are talking about renewable energies, and we are talking about climate change. So we are having that consideration now where we might be under pressure as a country, not just to use our fossil fuels, but also to use it in such a way that we do not contribute to the carbon footprint that the world is worried about in terms of clean energy and climate change. So all these intersections, all these considerations are things that were not in the equation in the past, but we have to start putting in the equation going forward as we find energy solutions. Yes, it is possible that we will get 24-hour power supply in good time, the same way we have leapfrogged maybe 1 million landlines using technology to a place where we have tens of millions of cell phones in Nigeria today. We can also get the same outcomes in electricity generation and power consumption by deploying technology that we have now and in the future to achieve that in a short time.
Engineer Ememasipo, thank you. I share in your optimism. I really do share in that optimism because why not? I mean, we have all the resources, and like Engineer, Babagana Mohammed, recognized or noted, we have the capacity. Again, let me come back to the studio here. Mrs. Verheingen did talk about the fact that we seem to have overinvested in the generation aspect of the chain, but even at that, we are not anywhere near, our generation capacity and all that. So what could have been wrong with the investment in this aspect of the chain?
Thank you very much. Yes, agreed. Power is the source. If you don't have power, it's like you are encouraging for poverty. Of course, because all the works around are tied to power. But let us also look at it from another perspective. Even those that we have now, have we used them to the fullest? The answer is no. First, yes, we are only using a subset of the world power, because coal has its sources, fossil fuel has its sources,
Solar.
renewable energy, solar has its. Have we have not. And it has to be systematic. If you look at the Aswaju, Tinubu, Shetima manifesto, they are trying to be systematic. It's not about because the wall is at this stage, we must jump from this wall and enter that wall. No, no, no. You don't jump things. You have to be systematic. You have started a process, you must take it to its logical conclusion. Then you start the next phase. But you can fast track it. That's why the PPI came on board. It's about fast tracking the process we are. Of course, we are late, we are too far behind. What can we do? That's what the Advocate Shetima manifesto is saying. Yes, we have to sustain the efforts made, but with brave reforms, we'll move ahead.
How do you hope to do that? That's usually the challenge. How do we move from point A to point B? How do we move from what we have at the moment. You understand, to the fact that Nigerians are reassured that okay, this is a new paradigm, you know, in the power generation sequence, and so let's somehow give these people a chance. And you know,
when the presidency of Buhari came on board, that's why the PPI came on board. Means they have now recognized there's an issue along the line. PPI came on board. PPI came to fix up so many things. And Tinubu Shetima are saying
PPI for the benefit of our audience. PPI is what?
Presidential Power Initiative. And the sole aim was because of this power what is on ground now, how do we improve it?
Let me put you on hold there. How do we improve it? You're watching Late Edition. When we come back, Engineer Babagana Mohammed will tell us, you know, he asked the question, how do we improve power supply? He will give us all the information when we come back from the break. Don't go away.
You can't fight piracy, you can't fight a war.
Therefore, you don't claim your rights.
The challenge I see is in the fiscal.
Do we have to wait until we have a problem?
See, the problem with those who speak on behalf of themselves and the country is that they should have facts. I'm speaking now as Minister for Transport.
For you to become economically independent, you must have to curtail the level of importation of other people's products and services.
How rich you are, you can't bring certain vehicle into the country.
Okay. There's no competitiveness within the state.
I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. Thanks for joining me. Welcome back. If you've just joined in, you're watching Late Edition this week, and we're looking at power and energy sectors and what lies ahead for Nigerians after the 2023 elections. And so, Engineer Babagana Mohammed, you know, I would like us to look at how we can move from point A to point B now. The presidential candidates are going about campaigning, and one of the campaign promises is on the power and energy sector. Presidential candidate for the APC is promising to move capacity to 15,000 megawatts. Mind you, our capacity, installed capacity is 13,000 megawatts. Consumption demand is 17,000 megawatts. So how do we achieve that if what we have installed already is 13,000 megawatts?
Brave reforms. Very strong reforms and commitment. We are there. Very strong reforms and commitment. And that has been shown in the Abuja Shetima manifesto. I kept saying PPI, Presidential Power Initiative, came as a result of the lacks we have. And now, in trying to fix up, they came up with so many things. Of recent, if you are on the social media, you see how mobile transformers came into the country from Germany.
So that's through the Siemens
arrangement.
Partnership.
That is what Buhari has done, and Tinubu Shetima are
but
saying.
This has been done at the latter stage when the administration is winding down.
It's a process. The good thing is
This, it could have been done much earlier.
good, but Tinubu has said he's going to sustain it and he will improve it with brave reforms. That is where the difference is now coming to happen.
Contextualize the brave reforms for us, because we say brave reforms.
Because if you see now, you said, if you look at how the sector was privatized, now you start asking, who bought what, and do they have they added any value when they bought what they bought? You see, they have not added any value. Most of them just went and bought these facilities and maybe converted them and pick up some of these things and went away with it. But Tinubu Shetima are saying, no, that's not the way. If we have to privatize, it has to be somebody who is going to bring in his money, not somebody who is going to look for the money from in. No, somebody who will bring the money from out.
So in essence, from your professional point of view,
Yeah.
Nigerians should not anticipate privatization of the power infrastructure. That is not that is not the right way for reforms.
No, you can privatize, but it has to be systematic and it has to be done holistically, and people have to be honest in doing it.
Okay.
You can't just go and give it to your cronies and expect something to happen. No.
Okay,
you must give it to people who have the capacity, who have the know and who have the money, who will bring in value into the system. That's what we are saying.
Okay, let me bring in Mrs. Olu Verheyen into the conversation and take along with you. I know you want to respond to some of the issues Engineer Babagana Mohammed had said, but also take along with you. You talked about overinvestment in the energy sector and, of course, the price, the tariff regime and all that. Nigerians are not even worried about, price or how much or the cost of, paying for electricity supply, as long as they get it. Just clarify for us what you mean by over-investment in the generation, aspect of the chain, and then respond to some of the issues Engineer Babagana has said as well.
Okay, thank you. So to clarify that, it's to talk about the point that you raised. You talk about 13 gigawatts of installed capacity, but on a good day, what actually gets distributed is close to maybe 4 or 5 megawatts. Once we hit 5 gigawatts, once we hit 5 gigawatts, 5,000 megawatts, the transmission line trips. Why? Because we don't have the capacity. So what I mean by overinvestment is that you've grown your generation capacity to 13 gigawatts, but you haven't actually done the same level of investment in your transmission capacity or your distribution capacity. And why haven't you been able to do that investment or attract, not only as either you do it as a government investment or attract private sector capital to it? As a private investor, one of the first things you will look at is whether or not you have the ability to earn sufficient revenue from the business that you're investing in, so that you can not only pay your customers who are going to be supplying you, but also make other investments to grow capacity and continue to meet the demand of your customers and earn a return to the people who gave you money. One of the major challenges in the power sector has been because we kept the power tariff, the revenue that everybody in that sector, every investor in that sector needs to make an investment decision, was kept low, significantly lower than what is required to meet all of those points I made, whether it's to pay for gas, whether it is to invest in expansion of transmission, or to invest in meters so that you can improve your collections. So it is over the last few years. And why did we keep that price low? Because the bulk of Nigerians, or the storyline has been that bulk of Nigerians are too poor to afford a commercial tariff. But slowly we've come to recognize that most Nigerians generate their power on their own, and the distributed source of power, whether it's generators, and this is where you need to take data-driven approaches to policy making, that over the last few years, there's been a data-driven approach to show that most Nigerians actually pay much more than what NERC is saying that they should pay to distribution companies. So you've seen gradually over the last few years an increase and a trend towards cost-reflective tariff. What that means is that the tariff that we are now paying for electricity means that the people who are providing, the investors who are providing distribution, transmission capacity now have sufficient revenue to be able to make the investments to expand that transmission and distribution capacity. So that first you evacuate the existing 13 gigawatts, and then you can start talking about how you expand beyond the 13. But today, when I say you have overinvested in generation capacity, what I mean is that the corollary is actually more important, is that we've invested in transmission and distribution. And the reasons we've done so are for the reasons I've mentioned. We had policies in place that made it impossible for us to attract the type of investment that would unlock all of this.
Thank you, Mrs. Olu Vehayen. I'm trying very hard to sound your surname correctly. I'm sorry if I haven't done good of it. Let me bring in Lady Engineer Asikpo into the conversation. And I'm just wondering what you think about the presidential candidate of the PDP's agenda on power reforms. And he has come out openly to say, look, privatization is the way. I mean, we're wasting, costs, energy, and what have you, on routine maintenance of our refineries, and they are not working. Every now and then, the refineries, break down, and the country is thrown into darkness. So he thinks that the best way is to privatize and completely decentralize, power issues from government control. But we've gone this route right from the beginning of the democratic dispensation, and it didn't seem to work. What do you think? What are your perspectives?
I think that the different presidential candidates are saying almost the same thing, but communicating them in different ways. There is consensus across the different parties that we need to have private investment, investors running the power sector. We need to have profitable companies that are business driven to manage investments of production of electricity, distribution, transmission of electricity, and distribution of it to the end users. So we have a situation where, like Mrs. Verhegen had just talked about, where the government had invested a lot in power generation, but we did not have the right companies or the right outlook into the distribution of this electricity to the end user. I would want to pivot back actually to the Bola Ahmed Tinubu manifesto and outlook. And I really want to focus on the area of confidence for end users in their own power consumption. The Bola Ahmed Tinubu manifesto has highlighted that we will have meter manufacturing companies in Nigeria. So that is a huge that is a huge step where Nigerians can actually see that they are contributing directly to a component of their own power generation.
Well, thank you for the points that you have raised. Engineer Babagana Mohammed, I know that we have a number of manufacturers across the country.
We have MOMAs and so many of them across Nigeria.
So what is the issue? Because the metering regime is not working.
Brave reforms. That's what I'm saying about brave reforms. Because all these things are on ground. What do you need? Just some small touches, technical touches for us to run. And that is what the Tinubu Shetima is talking about. That's why I said brave reform. Brave reform, you can see it from so many angles. You see, when you say Nigerians are poor, they cannot pay. No, I take exception to that. We are not all that poor. Now, just go to, because I'm a man on the street. Whoever shouted, he cannot pay for the bills brought by NEPA or by ADC or anybody. Who shouted? Nobody shouted. People will only shout when they don't see the light. But if the debt is there, people are paying. We are paying. I am paying. I have a meter.
I'm paying also.
You are paying also. And many of us across are paying.
The issue is that the light is not there.
The light is not there. So if the light is not there, what do you pay for? So
Mrs. Ranjan has talked about the fact that over investment in generation and neglecting the transmission and distribution infrastructure.
That is key, because the rate at which generation was funded was not the same rate at which distribution and transmission was funded. Very, very excellent. What do we need to do? We need to raise it up to the level of generation.
So which of the political candidates is speaking to these very issues?
That's why I said Tinubu Shetima manifesto is saying this. That's why I said, that's why they said brave reforms. That's what they meant by brave reforms. You don't need to open everything out it is. No, because a manifesto is a booklet. It's just an 80-page booklet. It cannot contain, there are silent points in it. These are part of the silent point we are now bringing out. When they say brave reforms, you now go and look what you have to put the infrastructure on ground. Government has started something. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. What do? We need to bring in. It has to be systematic, but reforms has to come in, but there must be willingness. And also understand, Tinubu and Shetima, they are two people who are very industrious and people who, Shetima is a banker. Shetima will not put his hand where money will not come out. Likewise, Tinubu. So these are people who are who knew the business of the economy. They will never, I put it on ground, they will never allow things to just slip under their nose. No, it will not happen. And they are going to use people who are qualified to be on that seat.
Mrs. Ryan, I don't know what you think about, our policies. Engineer Asikpo is saying, look, all the political presidential candidates, seem to be speaking the same thing about the reform roadmap to, in the power sector. But if you look at where we're coming from, the policy, there seems to be something wrong with our policy, thrust and all that. Now, Engineer Babagana is, of course, talking about routine maintenance of our refineries, ailing refineries, as old as they are. Do you think that there's something wrong with our policy?
I think, our policies, sometimes, let's put it this way. Let's talk about the oil products section of what you're talking about, right? Which is another subset of energy, which is availability of petroleum products in our markets. We currently import because we don't have refining capacity. Why don't we have refining capacity? The three biggest refineries have been sitting in government hands for decades. They've been maintained routinely, and they still seem not to be able to function. It's quite possible that the new set of investors and the new framework in place allows them to earn a return on investment. But I think with all things that you evaluate, you don't take out the option of privatizing if that is the right approach. You take a data-driven approach to it. If those refineries come in, if you try to attract investors, if the government isn't the right person to be running those assets, we should let it go and have investors come in. If investors come in and they tell us what they need to make those refineries work, then we should focus and keeps Nigerians at the center of all of our policy making. I think a data-driven approach is really important. When it comes to the oil to oil subsidy, what the Tinubu Shetima plan is quite clear, right? We spent about $10 billion on petroleum subsidies last year. It's quite clear that that's a wasteful and regressive spend, because the World Bank data came out recently and said that the 40% of the poorest Nigerians only buy 3% of that subsidized PMS. So the people that we aim to serve with those subsidies are actually not getting the benefit. That's what I mean by taking a data-driven approach. So now you have the data that says you intended to make sure that the poorest Nigerians can afford PMS. But the truth is, the way this policy has been designed, they're not getting that benefit. So it is time to remove that policy, and that's what that manifesto outlines. The way to remove that policy, to remove that subsidy, and redirect that money directly to the intended beneficiaries, the poorest amongst us and the most vulnerable amongst us. And what you need to do is keep an open mind around what your policy options are, which may include private investments into expanding your refining capacity. We cannot be one of the biggest producers of oil and gas in the world and continue to import products. That cannot continue. And that is clearly a requirement that we need to take a look at and make sure that we are taking a potential, and evaluate all options that enable us to get out of that quagmire, to improve the security of supply of products in our market.
Let me just piggyback on that and add that because we've had a culture where government has been running the refineries for some time, there is going to be some resistance on the part of the citizenry that, oh, we are selling this off to people. And the Bola Tinubu manifesto clearly shares that when it comes to privatization in the oil and gas sector, there will be local content, local equity sharing. And the Bola Ahmed Tinubu manifesto clearly states that companies, independent companies that want to operate in these sectors will be mandated to sell their shares on the Nigerian stock market, stock exchange. So this gives Nigerians an opportunity to buy shares in this company and be part owners of whatever is coming out of our commonwealth as exhibited in the oil and gas industry. So it's not just the policy that is in place, it is also the forethought of how to gain acceptance of these policies that the Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Shetima team exhibit, because they are aware of the sensitivities around privatization and they are getting ahead of the question and the concerns by making sure that Nigerians will individually benefit from these processes as they come on board.
Engineer, I think I'll still stay with you because this is somewhat your area, and that's talking about the renewable energy roadmap that was launched this year, targeting some hundreds of gigawatts by 2020. Now, doesn't this seem ambitious? And which of the political party presidential candidates are speaking to the issues of renewable energy?
Renewable energy is one of these new technology, well, not exactly new anymore, it's been around for a long time, that at some point seemed very expensive and undoable. But just like computer technology, like chip technology, we have found out that every 18 months, they become cheaper and they become faster. At this time, in developed economies, the cost of solar energy generation and coal generation are at parity. So basically, if you have a coal plant that is generating power and you have solar panels in a good location, the cost to you is going to be the same. So that means that we have this opportunity in a place like Nigeria where sunlight is abundant. We have hydropower, we also have even wind is also an alternative. So the question then becomes, how do we help people to take advantage of this new source of energy that is available and will eventually become a lot cheaper? The Bola Ahmed Tinubu manifesto has clearly stated that there will be incentives for people who are going to at least generate power through solar energy. There are also incentives for companies that want to go to the rural areas and generate powers. So you could have a situation where we could have solar farms in the northern parts and the middle belt part of Nigeria, where you have a lot of sunlight and you don't have a lot of forestation that could block the solar panels, and that will generate power and can feed rural areas or areas around there at a good cost. But we cannot neglect to mention that one of the biggest costs of clean energy is storage. You can have power when there is electricity, when there is sunlight, but when there is no sunlight, you need a storage device. So still, that means that we have to still depend on our grid and find a way to merge all the sources of electricity that we have together. If during the day you have electricity to run your life, during the night we should be able to have the grid supplying us if the cost of storage is high.
Okay, I just have, I'm actually should be closing the conversation, but I just like to give Engineer Babagana just a minute or so, and then Mrs. Verhagen another minute, and it's all about solar. 2050 is the deadline for transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. What kind of investment do you think that the incoming, presidential incoming president, yes, should make in this regard?
First, solar is a source of energy that is available across. And from the Athuwaju Shetima Manifesto, you see they talk about mini grids, which allows people to have smaller groups, power generated. Then we transform them into the larger grid, which means the incentive is going to be available. There will be incentive for people who want to take into that. That means there will be more power for more people and at a cheaper rate.
Incentive. Is it specified in the manifesto?
Of course.
Is it something that the party can be held accountable at the end of the day if he does win the election?
That is why it is in the manifesto. So those of us who are professional will keep on monitoring. Whatever you tell these people, Nigerians, will monitor you to the latter. The politics of now is different from the politics of yesteryears. When you said it, you made pronouncement, we will follow you up to it.
Okay. Mrs. Verhagen, what do you think about this? What should the Nigerians be looking out for? The campaigns are still going on, and of course manifestos are still being, campaign promises are still being made. So with regards to power generation, electricity, renewable transition, please, what messages should Nigerians open their ears to?
I think what they need to keep in mind around the transition to renewables, because I'm quite familiar with the sector. I invested across Africa, as you read in my bio, that when it comes to electricity, yes, renewables have a role to play. In distributed generation, like Engineer was mentioning earlier, with mini grids, where you incorporate those in rural areas where we don't have the grid. So they should be looking for solutions like that. When it comes to the grid, unlocking the gas generation capacity, the existing gas generation capacity through the reforms that are required commercially, legally, and in the regulatory frameworks, will be a key indicator of the ability to attract more investments, renewable energy investments into the power sector. So those are the things I would be looking at. That if we address the things that we discussed today around commercial, legal, and regulatory to unlock the existing gas supply, then you'll be able to attract investors who are bringing energy to the grid. When it comes, though, I think it's really important for people to understand, this is what I was earlier mentioning, that renewable energy doesn't help you make plastics or the clothes that we wear or make fertilizer. The bulk of energy used today, total energy used today, is still fossil fuels and will be for a long time because of all the other uses, especially in the industrial sector.
All right, Mrs. Oluverhagen. Mrs. Oluverhagen, I hope I got that correct. Thank you very much for your perspectives to our conversation today. I really do appreciate you, and thank you for your patience. Also, let me thank Engineer Masikbo. Also, both of you joined me via Zoom. I'd like to appreciate both of you once again. Thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us. And back here in the studio, let me also appreciate Engineer Mohammed Babagana, who had to quickly rush in to join us for this conversation. Thank you very much for the perspectives that you have shared with us. And that's it on Date Edition this week. We thank you for watching. From me and the production crew, it's bye-bye.